"I'll take you with me, my dear," Dionysus promised. "I will never leave you. When I ascend to my throne on Mount Olympus, you will be my queen for eternity." Dionysus kept his promise. He married Ariadne when he was finally recognized as a god and became the 12th Olympian. He made Ariadne his immortal wife. Oh, sure, he still had occasional flings with mortals. He was a god after all. But as far as Greek stories go, they lived happily ever after. Dionysus' last big adventure was on Earth before he came to be a full-time god. He decided to invade India. Why? Why not? He'd traveled all over the Mediterranean and into Egypt and Syria, but whenever he tried to spread the good news about wine farther east, he always got stopped by angry locals. Maybe that's because Mesopotamia was there when they invented beer. Maybe they didn't want any beverage competition. Anyway, he decided to make one final push to expand his market share. As far as the Greeks were concerned, India was pretty much the end of the world. So Dionysus decided to go there, take over, teach them about wine, and come back home, preferably in time for supper. His drunken followers gathered by the thousands. Some stories say that Hercules joined Dionysus for the expedition, and they had some major drinking contests along the way. Other stories say that the twin sons of Hephaestus, the Caberii, rode into the battle in mechanical chariots and fought bravely. A couple of times they got a little too brave and were surrounded by enemies, at which point Hephaestus himself had to come down, spray the enemy with his divine flamethrower, and bring his kids back to safety. Dionysus rode at the head of his army in a golden chariot pulled by 2 centaurs. A lot of towns surrounded him in Syria. The drunken army made it all the way to the Euphrates River and constructed a bridge to get them across. The first time Greeks had gotten that far. The bridge isn't there anymore. What would you expect? It was made by a bunch of drunks. It probably fell apart in about a week. Well, everything was going great until the army reached India. Those Indians knew how to fight. They had their own magic, their own gods, their own bunch of nasty secret weapons. Their holy men, the Brahmins, would sit on the field of battle looking all peaceful, and Dionysus' army would roll up thinking the enemy was surrendering. As soon as the Greeks got close, the Indians would fire rockets into the mist, jets of flame and blinding light, massive explosions that caused panic in the troops. After a bunch of tough battles, Dionysus finally made it to the Ganges River, which was the holy river of India. He assaulted one last fortress, a big castle on a hill, as tall as the Acropolis back in Athens. His centaurs and satyrs tried a frontal assault, climbing up the rocks, but the Indians set off some magical explosions that were so powerful the Greeks' front lines were vaporized. Supposedly, you can still see the after images of satyrs and centaurs burned into the cliffs where the battle had happened. At that point, Dionysus decided that enough was enough. They'd made it to India. They'd introduced wine. Dionysus had collected a sweet assortment of exotic predator cats like tigers and leopards. He'd even taken a leopard as his new sacred animal and started a fashion craze by wearing a leopard skin as a cape. The army had taken a lot of treasure. They'd met new and interesting people, killed most of them, and generally had a good time. So Dionysus built a pair of pillars on the banks of the Ganges to prove that he'd been there. He bade the Indians a tearful farewell and marched back to Greece. He dropped off a load of treasure back at the Oracle of Delphi in honor of the gods, and for a long time there used to be a big silver bowl in the Delphi treasure room inscribed, "Taken from the Indians by Dionysus, son of Zeus and Semele." One of the old Greek writers saw it. I'm not making this up. Anyway, Dionysus finally ascended to Mount Olympus and became the last of the major gods. Cut the theme music. Cue on the closing credits. Our camera pans away from the Olympian throne room where the 12 gods are rolling around on their wheelie thrones. And cut. Whew. We did it, gang. 12 Olympians. We collected the whole set, plus a few extra bonus gods like Persephone and Hades. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to sleep. I feel like I just got back from the Dionysian revels, where I have a splitting headache.